rolling coverage and discussing really everything surrounding the ongoing Israeli aggression all across Palestine. I am one of your hosts, Eugene Puryear, here once again alongside Rania Khalek. I mean, of course, Rania, as we've been saying, in a way, we wish we didn't have to be here, but nevertheless, still very happy to be here alongside you. Just as we start the show, we have the past several days to update people in terms of what we know in terms of the ongoing situation involving this conflict. And as you can see on our screen, the death toll in the Gaza Strip has gone up to 227 people at least. Now, of course, those numbers are just based on what we know, but there's a huge amount of destruction and rubble. 64 children are among those dead. The number of wounded is now over 1,600 people, so at least 1,600 people have been wounded. So it's very significant. I have a stat here I actually just want to read, Ronnie, and I want to get this correct because it's unbelievable. But we talked yesterday quite a bit about how Israel was saying they were going to increase the level of the assault last night. So when we think about that death toll of 227, remember this. At one point last night, Tuesday night, a 25-minute period, is the Israeli military dropped 122 bombs on Gaza, 122 bombs in 25 minutes, which gives you a sense of the depth and the breadth of what's going on. Another thing that's interesting, 50 schools in Gaza have been damaged in this attack. At least 75,000 people in Gaza have been displaced from their homes. There are serious shortages of water, of medicines. Electricity is, in and out throughout the day, which is obviously creating its own issues. The United Nations was reporting earlier today that they are struggling to get aid into the Gaza Strip, and that even though some of it's been approved, the Israelis are not letting them through. Save the Children has also been saying it's very difficult for them to get aid in and to assist. So very, very difficult situation there in Gaza, 227 dead, 64 of them children. The Israelis, of course, reporting that 12 people have died in Israel, 2 of them children, roughly 300 injured. So you can get a sense, of course, of the disproportionality that does exist there on that issue. And as we continue to talk here, it's not just the Gaza Strip, but there in the West Bank, of course, have also been a major increase yesterday in protest affiliated with the general strike. 4 Palestinians shot dead in the West Bank during protests that were tied to the general strike. 70 some odd people at least were wounded in protests that were tied to that. And of course, inside of Israel, as some would say, inside of 48 Palestine, there are ongoing challenges. There are the pogromists that are attacking Palestinians there. There are Palestinians who are, of course, standing up for themselves as part of the broader popular uprising that's happening in the revulsion that people feel over what has been going on in East Jerusalem and Sheikh Jarrah, also in the Gaza Strip and other places. That continues. And there was a bit of a kerfluffle this morning, in fact, because it came out in the mainstream media, although you said this, I think, yesterday, Rania, every single person who's been charged so far with the crime in terms of what's happening in 48 Palestine are Palestinians, despite the fact that it's been widely documented that there are these pogroms on the street that are brutally assaulting people. And in terms of the international political situation, earlier this morning, President Joe Biden did speak to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Biden is trying to pretend to the world that the U.S. is taking a harder line. He allegedly told Mr. Netanyahu that he expected a significant de-escalation to take place today. Netanyahu then left that call, told the media that he was not, in fact, inclined to de-escalate, and that not only were they willing to continue to fight until their quote-unquote objectives have been met, but he raised the issue in a meeting of foreign ambassadors, of potentially reoccupying the Gaza Strip. Now, they've turned it into the world's largest outdoor prison, but of course, this would be a major escalation to essentially reoccupy the Gaza Strip. And there was another member of Netanyahu's cabinet who also raised that issue today, that they may have to just completely and totally occupy it in an attempt to deeply destroy Hamas. So the Israelis directly thumbing their nose there at President Biden in the United States, basically daring them to do something and continuing their ongoing escalation in a major way, Rania.
Hi,
So
Dr. Abbas.
the aggression continues in a major way, and it continues
Hi,
to be
Dr. Abbas. Can you hear me?
extraordinarily tragic.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yes.
No, I mean, it's awful what's taking place. And I wanted to just mention that on top of the statistics that you referenced, Eugene, there are up to 15 families in Gaza, 15 Palestinian families who've lost 3 members or more. There's been the attempted wiping out of families with these bombings of people in their homes, essentially while they're sleeping. And on top of that, I want to draw attention to the fact that the Norwegian Refugee Council has a program that offers trauma counseling to children in Gaza. And they are reporting that 11 children receiving trauma counseling from them in Gaza have been killed by Israeli bombings while they were sheltering in their homes. So again, we keep talking about.
Well, Rania, I don't know if you can hear me. You may have broken up there, but I think that is an extraordinarily I don't even know, tragic. You don't even know what to say. I mean, a number of children, of young people who were already in trauma-informed care because of the impact of previous bombings, of previous attacks, of previous assaults, and then they are killed in the exact same type of attack that had, caused a number of significant problems for them. I mean, it's just, there's so many words you can say, Rania, all the normal words in this situation, but it's just, and maybe it isn't unbelievable. Maybe it should be believable, but that's what I thought when I saw that.
I think it's a good opportunity to remind people that in the war in 2014, what Israel called Operation Protective Edge, in a 51-day bombing campaign against Gaza, over 500 children were killed. And that included 142 families were either wiped out in whole or in part in that campaign, because Israel did what it's doing now, which is to target people in their homes. And this is intentional. There's a few reasons why this might be happening. One might be that someone in the family has some affiliation with Hamas, maybe. That could mean political affiliation. Maybe they work in a ministry. But let's remember, Gaza is under the administration of Hamas. So it's like saying that anybody, if you were to, bomb the U.S., it would be suggesting that anybody affiliated with any part of the U.S. government is a legitimate target, along with their families in their homes. And that could include somebody who works for Health and Human Services. That's the way that Israel, that's the way that they try to implicate these entire families and try to justify, it's collateral damage. The other case is just indiscriminate bombings of homes. Israel took great care to evacuate that media building that housed international media. They're not attempting, not that it would make it okay just to bomb people's homes after you evacuate them, but these are places they're not even attempting to evacuate. And a lot of these children were actually killed in a recent bombing that happened in the early hours of Sunday morning, where the Israelis bombed several homes, several residential buildings leading up to the hospital that are on the main street that leads to Al-Shifa Hospital. And over 42 people were killed in those bombings, including several children, because it essentially just targeted families while they were sleeping at night. So this is a very disturbing statistic, the fact that 15 families have lost at least 3 family members because of Israeli bombings of their homes. And then, to have any U.S. official going around saying that this is Israel defending itself when you see that kind of carnage is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, no, it's one of the thing about these warnings, which there's much we could say, but one thing I've been noticing people in Palestine on social media have been noting, several people I've seen, is how the so-called warnings are themselves almost a form of psychological warfare, because you don't know when it's coming, how long you have. What are they even going to strike the place? How do it induces a sense of terror and a sense of a lack of control over every element of your life, that to some degree, are you really getting a warning where you have enough time to get out? Are they just doing it for PR? Are you about to die in the next 5 minutes? Are you about to lose all your stuff? All these different elements to it, that it's presented as if it's some great humanitarian whatever. And the fact that they're doing it is obviously just PR. But I thought that was an interesting angle, that it has a psychological warfare aspect to it. And we know that certainly Unit 8200 also doing a lot of things during this. It's kind of gone under the radar, but texting people, we know you're involved and you're going to be held responsible and blah 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 blah. And just this sort of panopticon effect that brings on Palestinians. They know who you are. They know where you live. They know your phone number.
Well, so Palestinians have to, in order to get the proper identification paperwork, they have to register, I think, with the Israelis. I was reading that earlier today. The Israeli Ministry of Interior has a list of every Palestinian and their family members. And what their affiliations are. And whenever you have a child, if you're in Gaza or the West Bank, in order to get them the proper paperwork or IDs, because let's remember, Israel controls your ability to move and get in and out of the West Bank or Gaza. In order to get the proper identification paperwork, you have to register your child with the Israelis. So they actually have a list of who is who, where they live. They know they know who your family is. Again, they know what your political affiliation is. So it's actually quite frightening the way that they use that information to go and determine which family homes they're going to bomb. I mean, it's just horrifying to think about. I also want to note that Netanyahu did say something recently, and I don't know if it was yesterday or today, but he said that Israel is making an example out of Gaza for all of our enemies around us to see. So what he's essentially saying there is that this Israeli carpet bombing of Gaza is a message to Hezbollah, is a message to the Iranians. But I'd like to switch that. I'd like to turn that around on its head for a moment, because I actually think that what Hamas is doing to Israel is sending a message to Israel's enemies. Because when you think about the level of homemade rockets that they've managed to stockpile and then use, and rockets that can make it all the way to Tel Aviv and even up higher north into Israel. When you think about the number and the capacity, the military capacity of this group and the siege that it's been under, I mean, they've been able to achieve these military gains, improvements, under one of the most brutal sieges in the world right now, one of the most brutal sieges in modern history. And so I think in a way, Israel, the Israelis have to be watching this and thinking, if Hamas is able to paralyze Israel and paralyze our ability to, have airplanes flying in and out of the country, flights have been canceled because of these rockets, and paralyze people's daily lives. Everyone's in bomb shelters. They can't go to work. They can't go out and enjoy the beach like they might otherwise. If Hamas, from this little besieged enclave, under all these brutal sanctions, surrounded by Israeli gunboats and Israeli drones and Israeli snipers, is able to do this, imagine what Hezbollah could do. Imagine what Iran could do. I have to assume that that's a conversation.
Well, that's certainly what the Israeli politicians are saying. And that's really most of the conversation in the Israeli media. Well, let's turn to Gaza. We are very happy to be joined again here on Breakthrough News by Dr. Medhat Abbas, who's from the International Department of Gaza's Health Ministry. Dr. Abbas, thank you so much for being back with us here on Breakthrough News.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.
No, the pleasure is all ours. If you could just give our viewers a sense, what is the situation there on the ground in Gaza?
Oh, there is no situation. We are dying. We are dying everywhere. And death is around us everywhere. They are attacking domestic zones. As you know, Gaza Strip is a very tiny strip of land. It's only 360 kilometers square, inhabited by 2 million population. The length of Gaza Strip is 45 kilometers only, and the width of that is ranging between 5 kilometers and 11 kilometers. Imagine in this very tiny strip of land, which is the highly dense population all over the world. It's much more than Mumbai and Cairo, by the way. Imagine in this area, we are being attacked from the Navy and by heavy artillery bombardment and drones and F-35 and cannons and tanks at the same time. Imagine all those machines and quadricap, this small plane that get inside the windows and assassinate people inside their beds. All those technologies are being used, especially the F-35, which was manufactured by USA to defend army against another army, but not against children in their bed. Imagine now, we used to hear the sound of warplane before, and then we hear the explosion. Today, we don't hear, because the F-35 is very advanced, They attack us from afar, so we don't see them. We don't hear them at all. We just hear explosions. And because it has the ability to attack many targets at the same time, many children at the same time, so you hear dozens of explosions at once, everywhere around you. You don't know why. You don't know how. What's the sin of those people to be killed? They are just children. Like what you're writing in your screen, 227 killed. Out of them are 64 children. Well, they have nothing to do. 2 days ago, they killed one of my colleagues. He was an internal medicine specialist. They killed him with his wife and with all children, except one. He's still in intensive care. He's 16 years old, and nobody told him that he lost all his family. Of course, he's now he wake up, but they told him you will be okay, and nobody's mentioning anything about his family, because if the child know that he lost all his family, he will certainly die in the ICU. He had a sister. She passed away in this attack. She was in the 3rd year in the faculty of dentistry, and she was about to marry in 1 month. The last thing she said after attacking their building, which was 4 stories, she sent a message to her friend. She said, "I'm still alive under the rubble. Please come to clear me quickly." And then, but when they reached her, she was dead. Another colleague, also a psychiatrist of 66 years old, they killed him also with all his family. They attack a whole building without any pre-warning, so that the people die inside. Sometimes they give you a pre-warning, and sometimes not. So you don't know at what time you may die. Your children are scared. You cannot sleep during midnight. Imagine that you wake up on a very big sound of explosion with tachycardia. Your heart starts to beat quickly, and your children are screaming, and they are scared, and everybody's hugging you. They think that when they hug their father, that will be their protection. In fact, the father has nothing to do for them. And they are attacking health facilities. You know, 2 hospitals in the north, one is called Beit Hanun Hospital, and the Indonesia Hospital were attacked partially. And they have totally annihilated another primary healthcare clinics, 2 of them. And one main center, the headquarters of MOH, was also attacked, and the central laboratory was also attacked, in which we were doing corona investigations and giving corona vaccinations to people. I don't know what's the problem between the Israelis, the Israeli army, and the health facilities. What's the problem between the Israelis and our doctors? What's the problem between them and the children? Believe me, I'm trying to think 100 times every day why they are killing those people. I mean, that pilot who's attacking our children, under which law, under which condition? How can he sleep during night? Believe me, I couldn't understand. Believe me, if you bring me any Israeli child now and tell me punish this child, I will never do it. I can't. I can't punish a child. I can't punish a woman. I can't punish an elderly man. They killed 16 elderly men. Why? For God's sake, why? These are innocent civilians. They are staying in their homes. They were not representing any risk to anybody. They were just staying home in peace. I remember a woman saying, I was taking my lunch with my husband, with my children, and he died. He lost his head. And she was just crying and screaming in the hospital, in the emergency room. So tell me, for God's sake, this is the situation on the ground. If you want some numbers, our hospitals are having only 2,200 beds. In those beds, the ideal number, which is supposed to be, is 4,000. So we have almost 50%. We are poor. We have we are living under siege for 15 years. So if the same rates of casualties continue to reach the hospital with the same rate, I assure you that the health system in this country will collapse soon. And everybody hears about Gaza siege, Gaza siege. What meaning of siege? Let me tell you the meaning of siege. The siege is not only that we are not able to travel. No, the siege means that a student could not pay the tuition fees for his university. The siege means prevailing poverty for more than 80% of the population, and 68% anemia for our children, and 70% anemia for our pregnant women. And it means prevailing poverty everywhere where you go. The people cannot afford to find food, so they rely, 80% of the Palestinian families rely on free food tickets from humanitarian organizations. And you cannot make it outside. And if you can travel outside, it will be very difficult to return back. It may take months, by the way. And the other thing is that imagine a patient who is having cancer and he needs radiotherapy. Radiotherapy is not available in Gaza Strip, so that he has to take a permission from the Israelis. And the Israelis are not giving this permission except for 1/3 of those who are applying. So the rest has to face their destiny. They will succumb to their destiny and die in peace in Gaza. They die because of treatable complications inside Gaza, because they couldn't make it outside. So this is the meaning of siege. The siege means that we have shortage of medication inside our hospitals. Almost more than 50% of medications and medical supply are absent from our stores. So we were living in a siege. We have been living in that siege for 15 years. And then Corona came for 1.5 years. And now this aggression now for 10 days. Imagine now what could be the situation on the ground. The people now left their homes. almost 50,000 people, and they are now finding a shelter in the UNRWA schools. What about social distancing? How many times have you heard the word social distancing to avoid corona? 100 times every day you hear it. And when you send those people to the shelter in thousands, how could they have social distancing? I assure you that corona will spread very rapidly in those days because of the overcrowded people. They have attacked the roads leading to the main hospital of Gaza Strip. Al-Wahda Street is the main road leading to the central hospital of Gaza. It is totally broken, this street now. It's destroyed. So the ambulance has to find indirect ways to waste more time of a bleeding patient. And these are the golden seconds in which you do your best to save the lives of those people. Can you see those scenes on your screen? First of all, sometimes they send a pre-warning rocket, a small one, and then the F-35 will come and attack it, and then it will be annihilated at once. You see too much smokes, and every building around it will be shaking like an earthquake, and everybody's scared, and people run away. And that's our life in Gaza, sir.
We're speaking to Dr. Medhat Abbas. He's from the Gaza Health Ministry. Dr. Abbas, can you give us an idea of the kinds of injuries that you guys are having to treat? I mean, given the limited medical supplies Gaza was already suffering from, given the siege, how is it dealing with what I'm sure are really horrific and difficult to operate on injuries for those who survived these bombings?
The people are disfigured. I don't want you. I'm quite sure that the manufacturer of the F-35 has never ever thought one day that it might be used against children. It will disfigure everything. You don't find a human being, somebody who's amputated, somebody who's torn apart. I mean, it's just miserable explosions are happening. That's why the intensive care units are full of disfigured people. They're just breathing, and for sure they will die. And they are untreatable. They are just breathing, and you try to put some monitors and stabilize their blood, but they will never be able to make it. On the other thing is that how we can cope with this shortage of supplies. I tell you, the emergency needs are available in our emergency rooms and the operation rooms, but we are using them. We are trying to rationalize the use of those things as much as we can, because if we use them properly and normally, we will run out of them very soon. So we're trying to rationalize the use step by step, and we try to appeal for every international organization to extend a helping hand to us so that we can sustain our service. Now, Egyptians have opened the border to receive some of our patients, and I read in the news that they are now going to build a field hospital adjacent to the border of Gaza and Palestine, so that they can take our patients. And I hear that Jordan also is planning to send a field hospital to help us. But if the Israelis continue attacking us with the same rate, I think no hospital will be able to cope with the mounting numbers of casualties at all.
Yeah.
And
well, one thing I want to ask as well, Dr. Abbas, that with the New York Times is reporting this morning, the lack of water, the lack of food inside of Gaza currently. Can you talk about the impact of that as well on people, which I'm sure is very intense?
Well, we have no potable water in Gaza. Most of the time, you have to buy it, but you don't have it reaching your home like any other country in the world. We don't have that. You have to buy it, and it will cost you money. And because of the prevailing poverty in Gaza, not everyone can buy it. And this is explaining why we have high rates of renal failure in Gaza, because the water that they drink is not suitable for human beings. About food, when I told you that 68% of our children are anemic, they are having what's so-called iron deficiency anemia. They do not swallow meat. They do not taste hamburger. They don't know those things. So I remember once upon a time, I went to a school and I hear that the students are fainting during morning time. They are standing in lines before getting to the class. And I asked the headmaster, what's wrong with those children? With those girls? They were girls. She said some of them are very poor. They do not take any food. They are just starving. I did not believe it. I said, could you please show me some of them? And she asked 3 or 4 girls to come to me. I was shocked. They were, underweight, pale, and the poverty was seen on their faces. So I went to a friend of mine and I said, hey, he was a businessman. I said, for God's sake, I need to bring them. Don't tell me that they need iron tablets. No, they need food. They need good food to eat. So that friend, thank goodness, he gave them one sandwich of meat every day for 1 month to the whole school. But that is only one school. We have hundreds of schools. I was not able to go to the other because we have no money to do that. So this is the summary of the situation. Again, the same percent, almost 70% of every pregnant mother in Gaza is anemic also. We are living under siege for 15 years, which has never ever stopped till this moment. And the corona is there, and now we have this aggression, all of them at once. And electricity is another big problem. The Israelis used to give us 140 megawatt. Because of the attacks of the infrastructure, they have reduced them to only 20 megawatts. So now we are relying on generators to operate our hospitals, which are consuming a lot of fuel. Just today morning, they allowed fuel to get inside the hospitals, but they control everything what gets inside. They control everything, who's getting outside, who's getting inside, what you eat, what you drink, where you go, who are your relatives, everything they know about us. And they're just putting us under microscope, and they're selecting which one to die at any point they want.
Dr. Abbas, I'm curious.
Oh, no, go ahead, Rania.
So, well, given that some of your colleagues have apparently been targeted, as you were talking about before, along with their families in the Sunday, essentially, massacre in the road that leads to the hospital, has that road been repaired? Are people having difficulty accessing El Shifa Hospital since those bombings?
The people can still access the road the way through collateral roads, because there are many roads around the hospital, but it's time consuming, but they will certainly reach the hospital. The main problem is this occupation. If those people quit and let us live free, believe me, we love peace. We want to live in peace. We don't want to harm any human being in the world. You know, by the way, when Joe Biden became the president, I felt very happy because I saw him visiting the hospital during his election campaigns, and he was reassuring all the workers, the doctors and nurses. I felt very happy. I said, oh my God, because he lost one son one day. I'm quite sure that he will feel with the pain that we have in Palestine, and he will certainly bring justice to us. And I was waiting that. And when he won, I celebrated that with my children. I said, hey, now we will have justice. America has a very good president today, and he was for sure he will not let us live under this pain. And then when I saw the F-35 attacking us for the first time during his presidential time, I felt very depressed. I was very depressed, believe me. And then they said he will call Benjamin Netanyahu in 1 hour. I said, oh my God, he responded to our appeals for sure. He will tell Benjamin Netanyahu, stop killing the Palestinian children now. And after that, I discovered that he told him he will give him some weapons for almost $800 million. Believe me, I was shocked.
Are you afraid, Dr. Abbas? Do you feel afraid in Gaza right now?
I lost feelings. I'm apathetic. It doesn't make too much difference now. It doesn't make too much difference. Because you see, everybody around you may die. So, you know, when they keep attacking you along the hour or your life like that, you become like, I don't know, you lose sensations. Your heart becomes dead. You feel that you're frustrated to a degree that it doesn't make too much difference. You're desperate. It doesn't make too much difference. I saw my children crying. I tried to support them, but I don't have that feeling of pain that I used to feel before. Now it makes no difference. I don't know what happened to me. Maybe I need to go to a psychiatrist. I don't know, but I'm quite sure that all of us now have psychiatric problems because of those explosions. You know, it's very hard. Very hard. I live near the seaside. You know, imagine that. The Navy, when they attack you, you listen to the voice twice. Once when they launch it, and once when it reached us. So you hear 2 explosions for every attack. So they are doubled. And the cannons from the other side, with the artillery bombardment, and the drones are in our sky for 24 hours. Do you know the sound of those drones when they are in hundreds? They are like motorbikes, but they are flying in the sky. They are very noisy. And the F-16 sometimes come to visit us, but the F-35 attacks us from a way that we have never seen it, by the way. We only read about it because you listen to the explosions and you don't see any more pain. This is what's happening in Gaza now.
Well, Doctor, I want to also, I mean, we don't know when this is going to end, but it seems that the impact of everything that has taken place so far, this brutal bombardment, artillery fire, naval fire, will mean that every problem that exists in Gaza will be magnified now significantly because of the massive damage that's been done.
Yeah, Gaza is returning back to the Stone Age soon. If they continue like this, there will be no Gaza. There will be only some rebels with some killed people, with some cadavers and cemeteries. I don't know. They are attacking us heavily, and I don't know. I don't know how could that continue. I don't know. Do you know? Let me tell you the story that everybody of us knows it in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu will certainly go to prison because of corruption charges. And the only way for him to escape that crime is to kill more children in Palestine so that he can succeed and make a new coalition in his government. And then he may change the law so that nobody can arrest the prime minister of Israel. This is the only thing now. This is my belief because I could not understand. I would ask him now, please, for God's sake, make an interview with Israeli spokesman and tell him why you killed Dr. Ayman Abu Auf and his children. I want to have an answer to this question. I want to have, because, I know that doctor. The last time I met Dr. Ayman was 2 months ago when my brother had Corona. Dr. Ayman is the one leading the battle against Corona in Gaza. And I went with my brother to the hospital. It was the end of his duty and he was going back home. When he saw me, he said, "Hi, Dr. Medhat." And he returned it back to me to help. He used to help everybody. And he returned it back to me and said, "How can I help you, Dr. Medhat?" I said, "My brother is febrile and I think he's having Corona right now." He said, "Okay, just don't worry." He made all investigations for him. He reassured me and my brother. He said, "You will be okay. Do you need any help, Dr. Medhat?" I said, "No, thank you so much." He went back home. He was teaching our students in faculties of medicine, and he was teaching doctors to become specialists in Gaza. Why they killed him? He was 50 years old. He was born in Germany. He studied medicine in Slovakia, and he did his postgraduate of medicine in Jordan. He was highly educated. Why they killed him? That loss cannot be substituted, Even when ceasefire will not bring him back to us, to our hospitals, and to our patients. It will never return him back again. Why they killed him? Believe me, I don't know. Why they attack health facilities? I need an answer for that. It's not justified, It's not, I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand how a pilot could attack those targets. These are not targets. These are civilians. Do you kill children? I'm quite sure that the one who made F-35 it was made to defend America from another army, but not against children of Gaza. Would that manufacturer do it? Would he make another weapon to kill more children? No. Believe me, Caterpillar, when they were just demolishing houses by Caterpillar, somebody wrote a letter to Caterpillar company in USA and said, "Are you making those to demolish houses of civilians?" It was a very big problem. They told the Israelis, "If you keep demolishing houses, we will stop selling our equipment to you." How could the manufacturer of F-35 give it to somebody who's killing children? That's a disaster. Please convey our message to those people there in USA. Believe me, we love you. We love Joe Biden. But why? A phone call from Joe Biden to that killer Benjamin Netanyahu would stop all this tragedy right now. Why doesn't he call him and say, "Stop killing children"?
Again,
on behalf of America, he can stop him.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're speaking to Dr. Medhat Abbas. He is from the Gaza Health Ministry. For those who are watching, can you give us an idea of what's the situation for doctors like right now? I mean, I imagine medical staff is probably working around the clock. We see there's 227 dead. So that's how many injuries are we talking about here? And you were describing very brutal injuries, things like amputations. Does Gaza even have the specialties, the people who specialize in those specific things that it would need to even deal with these injuries? Because in some of the most sophisticated hospitals in the world, you might have trouble, I imagine, dealing with the kinds of amputations and shrapnel injuries that people are getting who survive these bombings.
We are understaffed. The public staff, another meaning of the siege, is taking only 50% and sometimes less every month for 7 years today. Only 50% of your salary. And imagine that you're not affordable to buy many things because the full salary was not enough to meet our basic needs. So when it was dropped to 50% only because of this siege, Imagine how could our situation be. So the public staff are frustrated because of that. On the other hand, we are understaffed because the government cannot recruit more staff to meet the needs of the patients because of the prevailing poverty in the community. And now, because of Corona, many of us were infected by Corona and stayed home. They cannot get outside because they will represent a risk for the patients. And now we are having those attacks. It's not putting a pressure on the entire health system, but mainly the surgical departments and the ICUs and the emergency rooms. Of course, they are suffering. You are making shifts, emergency, of course, duty, and they don't leave the hospital for 24 hours and then change to another shift like that. But it's very exhausting, of course. And by the way, when you go back home, you want to sleep, you can't sleep, sorry. The drones will not let you sleep. The phones will not make you sleep. And the attacks every now and then will not make you sleep. So you have to work like drowsy. Believe me, if you stop asking me questions now, I'll sleep while making this interview. We are so tired. We haven't slept for the last 10 days. We did not sleep.
Well, Dr. Abbas, again, for those who are just joining, we were speaking with Dr. Medhat Abbas from the Health Ministry in Gaza. Dr. Abbas, we are really grateful to you for giving us some of your time here today and also last week. Thank you again for joining us here on Breakthrough News.
Thank you so much, sir. And best regards to all of you. May God bless you all. And I hope one day that Joe Biden will pressurize Netanyahu to stop killing our children. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, Rania, I have to say, I think many of us here in the United States are asking the same question when we're seeing what is happening. 227 dead in Gaza, 64 children, over 1,600 people are wounded, over 72,000 people have been displaced from their homes, 50 schools in Gaza have been destroyed. There is a shortage of electricity, a shortage of water, a shortage of food. I believe, as you laid out, Rania, 15 families have essentially been annihilated, entire families. Correct me if that's not the right statistic. But when we see these sorts of numbers, and just to compare that again, 12 people have been killed in Israel, 227 to 12. I mean, the level of disproportionality is massive there. But I think a lot of us, Rania, are asking the same question about Joe Biden, about the U.S. government. I mean, it's not as if we're like super surprised because we know U.S. policy, but well, one thing Bill Ayers said to me years ago, Bill Ayers, the longtime activist, he said, just because something doesn't surprise you, if it's outrageous, you should say it's outrageous. Don't become too cynical. I mean, these are massive crimes. And it's just so outrageous to hear what we heard from Dr. Abbas and then to see the cavalier nature with which the Biden White House will not address
before we touch, I want to get into the Biden White House, but I do want to make a point because we just spoke to a doctor, Dr. Medhat Abbas from the Gaza Health Ministry, the Gaza Ministry of Health. And I think it's important when we talk about the Gaza Ministry of Health to call it that. CNN, on the other hand, there's this internal memo that Dina Takruri from AJ Plus actually tweeted out that CNN sent around to its staff, directing them to call it the Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health when reporting casualty numbers. It was a memo that was sent by the Jerusalem bureau chief. Now, the Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health, there's a reason CNN wants to call it that. It's because these numbers, the numbers you just described of the dead, are so horrific. Over 60 children. That is a horrific, shameful number of children murdered by these airstrikes. To preface that, to add the caveat of Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry is an attempt by CNN, and other outlets do this too, to dehumanize these children. Because everyone knows all you have to do, it's right out of the Israeli playbook, throw in the word Hamas, and suddenly anything becomes okay, including the murder of children. And I just wanted to point that out about CNN, not to single out CNN, though they deserve to be singled out, because I think that they are the way they report on Israel-Palestine has always been completely biased and one-sided. But just to note that the level the mainstream corporate media in the U.S. goes to dehumanize Israel's victims, including children, constantly. I mean, not only do Palestinians have this disadvantage when it comes to military power, right? They've got homemade rockets up against a country that has the most sophisticated destructive weapons in the world. They're also up against a propaganda machine that has the full support of the biggest media outlets in the world that dehumanize their murdered children by trying to downplay their deaths, by putting Hamas run in the beginning of Gaza Health Ministry. Is they're implying that it's not to be trusted, that you can't even trust the health ministry in Gaza because Hamas. I mean, why don't you just let the Israeli government do your reporting? Like, it would just make it easier. Just get rid of the middleman and just like straight up publish their PR releases.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, and some of them we know that they are. And I think that I'm so glad that you brought that up because, you know, when you look at the sort of veracity issue, I mean, it's not as if the Israelis can be trusted. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, you know, the issue of the media building who was attacked, and they're like, you know, the Israelis, oh, it was Hamas. We know for sure. They said, we showed the U.S. a smoking gun. And then the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who, again, is certainly no friend of the Palestinians, said that they have seen no evidence that that was true. So you've got even Israel's closest ally that's shipping them potentially $735 million in weapons, saying, well, actually, we have no idea that that's true. And then you have CNN saying they're reporting the Hamas-run health ministry. And it's also with the press. I mean, I know I mentioned this yesterday, and I know people probably think, why am I harping on this person who's not really that important? But Bari Weiss, I mean, was shopping the same thing around that you can't trust anything you hear, even if it's from international media, because Hamas controls the press and controls what they write and controls what they
everyone
say.
knows Hamas just controls everything, right? Like,
the Associated Press
we're
totally
like funding Hamas, right? We're Hamas. I mean, it controls us. I mean, that's essentially. It sounds ridiculous. It's like saying, my goodness, these people will go the lengths you have to go to in your brain to try to justify the murder of children is what's happening to someone like Bari Weiss right now. She needs to justify the murder of children, but she can't do it.
They are killing children. She said it was good. I mean, not good, but she said what you have to do is kill kids.
Yeah, well, in order to justify it, though, you have to come up with these boogeyman reasons. Like, it's in Bari Weiss's mind, like, Israel has to be just. There has to be a reason. Like, they wouldn't just kill children, as if there's a reason, as if there's anything that would make it okay to bomb a family while they're sleeping. I mean, just the level of like elitism and like lack of humanity. Like, what is wrong with you? You must have worms in your brain to be able to justify the murder of children. I don't care what your ideology is. I don't care how invested you are in having a stupid ethno-supremacist state. Like, how do you look at these pictures coming out of Gaza of mangled children, of people crying over their babies, and think to yourself, well, that there must be a reason for that. Like, unless you're just a racist who doesn't care. I mean, it's like Palestinians are like animals to you. And you're fine with them being just murdered. They're not human to you. That's the only way. I mean, and all the people, you know, Bari Weiss is just, sorry, not to harp on her for too long because she doesn't deserve as much attention. But she's also this person who goes around talking about cancel culture. And oh my God, I work at the most elite publications in New York, but I'm constantly getting canceled because of my racist opinions. Meanwhile, she's actually justifying canceling entire Palestinian families, literally. Like, give me a break.
Well, real quick before we turn the page, shout out to Braithwaite here, your donation, very appreciated, saying it's a great show. Thank you. I think that we're doing the best we can here, obviously in a tragic situation. Raymond Random, thank you for your donation, making some very positive comments, Rania, about yourself. I also think Rania is great in every way. Appreciate y'all. And of course, anyone who wants to make a donation there in the super chat, we will do our best to read your comments, at least if they are appropriate to read on air. But shout out to everyone who donates both before and ahead of time. We've actually had great support from people in the chat throughout this. And I think that a lot of the folks watching this now and others have been doing a lot to spread this stream around as we're going here, as we've been doing this. So big appreciation.
I want to add something to what you're saying, please. Eugene, which is a little, it's related to what we're covering in a sense. I just want to say that, you know, I am newly a part of the Breakthrough News team. I just joined Breakthrough News in April. And I have to say, I could not be happier to be at this outlet right now. I can't imagine anywhere else where we could be giving you this kind of live coverage and these sorts of interviews of people on the ground in Gaza, in the West Bank, that we've been able to do. I can't imagine doing it anywhere else. And so I just want to say, I feel really lucky to be a part of this team. Thank you, everybody, for watching and supporting. And if you do want to support us, you can always throw money in the super chat. But even more importantly, you can become a patron at patreon.com/breakthrough news, which is what makes it possible for us to bring you this kind of live coverage during these sort of emergency events.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm really happy that we have the
guest,
infrastructure for this. Yes.
No, well, we're very
guest.
happy to have
Let's
you. Very excited for you to join. Definitely get some coffee. We want to bring here next Ciara Taylor, popular educator, organizer, good friend of Breakthrough News, also one of the hosts of It's Not You, It's Capitalism from Breakthrough News. Ciara, really appreciate you being on with us today.
There she is. Not anymore.
There you go.
We can hear you.
You're good. No, now you're good.
You can hear me?
We can.
Online.
Okay,
yes,
cool.
Thank you all for having me.
Sorry.
Sorry about the tech difficulties. I don't know why I'm apologizing.
No, I think it was my fault. Just things happening. We're happy to have you here. We're happy to have you here. Ciara, obviously, there's so much going on. I mean, the 227 people, 64 children killed in Gaza, 4 Palestinians shot yesterday in the West Bank in relationship to the popular protests connected to the general strike, pogroms against Palestinians inside of 48 Palestine. I mean, there's so much to this conflict that you don't even know where to start. I mean, and certainly to me, one of the things we were just talking about is just the unbelievable callousness of the U.S. officials, of the U.S. government. I mean, we're seeing more, of course, and certainly very welcome in terms of what we are seeing in terms of the handful of people speaking out in Congress. But as much as you maybe expect it, it just feels so unbelievably callous to see this country, the United States, where we are, just provide this unconditional support to what really is a slaughter.
Yes, it literally is. And I think that this callousness is very indicative of how the U.S. state works and how they manage the interests and the values of the ruling class. I mean, I know I'm really corny and I've brought this up before from Rush Hour, but Agent Carter always says, follow the rich white man. And I usually bring that to follow Wall Street. What is Wall Street doing? What are their interests? What is actually happening here? And I think what we're seeing is the Palestinian question coming up against the Israeli state, that apparatus that is really backed by the U.S. state. And I think that it's been so beautiful in pouring of solidarity and even shifting of narrative and rhetoric, which really exposes the decline in hegemony of the Israeli state, Netanyahu, and also the United States apparatuses decreasing hegemony in the world overall.
I think that's an extraordinarily good point. And I noted this yesterday. The Israeli media has been filled with articles, including an editorial in the Jerusalem Post, saying that Israel is losing the media war. And, there's a lot of people, they're obviously, most of these things are upset about it. How are we, not convincing people? Now, you look at what they're saying. I don't know why they're surprised they're losing it. But I mean, I think it's an important piece here, what you're saying, because it seems that there's a relationship between really the rising tide of many movements around the globe against this neoliberal capitalist imperialist structure and the ability of the issue of Palestine and the struggle of Palestinian people being able to break through in a way. I always hate to say things are unprecedented, but I've been following this since 2002. It really does seem like breaking through in an unprecedented way.
Definitely. And I think Rania, when she was saying people with worms in their brains, I mean, this is zombie Zionism. Zionism is dying and is clutching at every possible means to maintain power and control. And I think that the media and the way in which the media is, I would say, lifting up the horrors of Israeli apartheid and the pogroms against Palestinians, but it's really exposing the way in which our society is getting, like, we're starting to understand the way that the state works. We're starting to, over these past couple years alone, we saw people getting out into the streets last year for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, which was unprecedented. I'm sure we would definitely say it wasn't just happening in large cities, but also smaller rural towns, bringing out people from so many different ethnicities, all different sorts of walks of life. You also have the recent, of course, the Palestinian, the solidarity demonstrations with Palestine, which was definitely unprecedented. And I think that why the state, whether the Israeli state backed by the US or the US, specifically, is that they know that there is a storm heading their way. We are in an economic crisis, an economic free fall. We are in the midst of a COVID crisis and a healthcare crisis. People are becoming homeless by leaps and bounds, and these states have no solutions for it. And I think what they're really worried about is not just the fact that they're losing the battle of the media, but that people are actually beginning to see our common interest. And I think that people are beginning to unite across lines of historic division, which is very dangerous to the US state apparatus.
One thing I'm curious your thoughts about, a moral question, if you will. The way we talk about things like this, it's there's so much there because, there's what we see happening and how do you express it in words. In our streams here and other people I've seen, there is a lot of emphasis on the fact that there's 64 children who have been killed, and I think there should be a lot of emphasis. But I have seen some discussion about, on the internet, I guess, on the internet for whatever that's worth, but some discussion about whether or not that's the right way to frame it, because obviously, certainly we are not supporting the murder and killing of adults. It's all whatever it is, but it does seem like it brings something out. So, I don't really know where the question is in that, but I'm curious your thought about how we present these sorts of things in a way that, on the one hand, I think helps bring the depth of it out, but on the other hand, doesn't cheapen the reality of the breadth of who's being affected.
Yes, definitely. I think that, that is a very difficult thing to answer. I think that Coretta Scott King once talked about the fact that poverty is violence. And I think that too often we think about violence as just simply being boots on the ground or the physical struggles that take place, or physical skirmishes or whatever. But we have to understand that violence is more than that. Again, poverty is violence. Palestinians and people living in Gaza not having access to COVID vaccines, to healthcare since this crisis has begun. And obviously before that, that's violence. People losing their homes and being forced out, that's violence. We really have to see, and I think that it's not just a moral imperative in the sort of, I don't know. I don't want to use any terms to offend folks, but in like the surface way, but a moral imperative in a deeper way of how do we actually think about the world that we want to live in and what is possible. How is that world different when we are able to take control of it? And so I think that in order for us to do that, we have to expand our understanding of what violence is. We have to expand our understanding of what imperialism is. The state, again, is changing its tactics. Vijay Prashad talks about it as hybrid wars. And these wars are not only, again, militarily fought, but they're fought on an ideological level. And they're also fought in an economic and financial level. And so what you all were talking about before in sense of the history of the US state backing Israel. I mean, you go back to, before Israel was declared a state in 48, you saw when Zionists like Theodore Herzl were trying to sell the idea of this Zionist project, of this project that would be the Israeli state. He talks about, and his contemporaries talk about, it would be strategic alliance for Great Britain and the US to back this state. And why is that? I mean, we're starting to see the ramifications of that today. US had emerged as a superpower after the World War II. They were now up against revolution that started to take place all over the world, starting after 1917, and they were in a ideological and power struggle with the SSR. And we're seeing this today with the United States and China. US is trying to stake its claim as the superpower and the moral authority. But obviously, we're starting to see past that. And so I'm sorry, I just kind of went off, but there's just so much.
That's all you can do, really, is go off. Because what you're saying is true. There is so much. It's hard to eat. I mean, we've been live almost every day for 4 days. I mean, we've done 5 or 6 of these, and you still feel like there's so much to say, even when you've said so much about what's happening and so much to think about. And again, for those just tuning in, this is the Breakthrough News live rolling coverage of the ongoing Israeli aggression in Palestine. 227 dead in the Gaza Strip, at least 1,600 at least have been wounded, 64 children killed. And we are joined here by Ciara Taylor, the organizer and activist and popular educator and just friend of the show here. One thing I want to ask you, Ciara, and this maybe be a segue to our next guest that I want to bring on in just a second. You are a founder, longtime member associate with the Dream Defenders, which was viciously attacked for taking a position in solidarity with Palestine. I mean, talk, if you could, about that. We talk about the state, about the impact of attempts to stifle the growth of pro-Palestinian sentiment in this country over the past few years.
Yes. So, I mean, as many people know, the Dream Defenders, especially when we started, Black-led, Black and Brown led organization in Florida. And many of us had come in, not just into the organizing or the organization of Dream Defenders, but as a part of struggles against police brutality and mass incarceration that really culminated around Trayvon Martin being killed, of course, but Mike Brown being killed. And so one of our founders of Dream Defenders, Ahmed Abu Zunaid, is actually from East Jerusalem, Palestine. And for many of us within the organization, he was our introduction to Palestine, to the history, to the struggle, and also to the connection of Black and Brown people in solidarity with Palestinians, not only in the United States, but around the world. And so we initially were scheduled to go to Palestine in 2014. And then, of course, the war broke out there with Israel bombarding Palestine. I can't remember how long the conflict was, but obviously we were very much like in this situation here, just glued to the television, just extremely upset, wanting to, do something about it. And we ended up actually going to Palestine in January of 2015. And I think that in our interactions there, and, I'll let Tef get into it, but in our interactions there, I think that it really deepened our understanding for our solidarity and why it felt so natural to be in solidarity with Palestine. you know, whether consciously or subconsciously. I know for me it was subconscious because I wasn't, you know, quote unquote woke yet. But we understood that our struggles were connected because we were up against the same state that was oppressing us. And so when we were in conversation with Palestinians there, of course, we were like, okay, what do we do? We're ready. You know, some of us were like, all right, let's move to Palestine and like, let's get it popping. And the Palestinians were just like, no, you have to take down the US state. You have to go back to the belly of the beast and not just tell people about what you saw here, but actually fight and struggle against the US state and build a movement that is able to be coordinated with international struggles like that of the Palestinians. And so if we want to really struggle with Palestinians in a real way, it's not just the demonstrations, although I think they're good for the heart and the soul, and they're, you know, it's education and it's bringing together. But we also have to take on poverty. We also have to on the issue of healthcare. We also have to take on the issue of housing. I mean, how many Arab folks live in Michigan that doesn't have clean water? You know, so when we're thinking about our solidarity, we're thinking not just about the plight, but the insight. How do we understand our struggles connected so that our solidarity and our unity can actually kick the ass of those who are oppressing us?
No, I think that's such a good.
I love that. I just want to say I love the term zombie Zionism.
That's
and
all
that,
you
that
do?
was coined. Yeah. That was coined here on Breakthrough News by Ciara Taylor. No, but I think what you're saying is so crucial because like there is this connection, right? There's it's kind of like the issue that we're dealing with at home in terms of like even something as simple as wealth inequality. Yes. Israel is a part of this Western imperialist system, and all of them are working together. The US, the Europeans, the Israelis, the Saudis, the weapons companies, Wall Street, like, you know, they're all on one side, you know, making sure they can sustain this disgustingly unequal status quo that's racist and classist. And then there's the rest of us who are suffering from, you know, it's the suffering that everyone is experiencing is all so deeply intertwined and connected. And it's like our enemies are working together. So we have to.
Yeah, well, let's bring in our next guest who just joined us, and I definitely appreciate that. Sorry for cutting you off, Rania, but we want to bring in Tef Poe, co-founder of Black Men Build, organizer, musician, on the ground, been on the ground in Palestine, on the ground in Ferguson. Tef, appreciate you joining us, man.
Peace, man. Thanks for having me back. I love being on this show. I love rocking with y'all, everything y'all represent.
You know, Tef, I mean, you know, I almost don't even really know where to start. We've been saying the whole time there's so much swirling around all of this. I mean, you've been to Palestine, you were on the ground in Ferguson, and I think that connection between Palestine and Ferguson has played such a big role in why this big movement in the U.S. is out with people in solidarity with Palestine. I mean, just talk, if you could, maybe just a little bit, just how you're feeling in this moment.
Well, the way I feel, you know where I land. I always land in the favor of resistance. So I feel that I'm going to do everything that I can to support the Palestinian resistance. I'm going to encourage the Palestinians to continue to resist. I'm going to push back on any forms of the false narrative. And we're going to do what we can to encourage folks to rebel. I'm on the side of the revolution.
What was it like there in Ferguson? I mean, you know, so many of us were just watching it online and hearing about it later. What was it like there in Ferguson to see folks from Palestine come into the struggle to assist what y'all were rebelling against there?
For me, it was an education process, first of all, because going into Ferguson, I didn't know much about the Palestinian struggle at all. I grew up in a Black Zionist church. Where my father would watch television shows like Tim Hagen and Kenneth Copeland and the 400 Club, whatever it's called. And these are Zionist religious institutions that train Black people to support Zionism, to support the state of Israel. I grew up in a Black household that where the church would tell us, whatever Israel does, you support it. And so Ferguson, was an opportunity for me, for one, to build camaraderie with a person that was a very good friend of mine that's no longer with us, by the name of Abbas, who was also Palestinian. He lived with me, and a lot of people know at this point, he was a brother who had struggled with heroin addiction, but he used the movement to help him get past his issues. He was very passionate about the people. And he used to tell me all the time about Palestine, Palestine, Palestine. And I used to really look at him like, yo, Baz, you really driving it home to us about Palestine. And I did not get it until I went a part of the delegation that the Dream Defenders put together. I was so blessed to be on that delegation with Ciara and Ahmed and Philip and so many other different people that are now some of the most prevalent voices in the movement as far as Black and Palestinian solidarity goes. That trip was a springboard for the type of solidarity that was going to build. But also prior to going, I want to say that Palestinian women were tweeting and emailing and contacting us on the internet about how to protect ourselves from tear gas and the other biological agents that the police were using. So then I started to peel back the layers and understand what was really going on here. And what was really going on is that we were up against the same exact imperial forces that they were up against. The officer that killed Von Derek Myers worked for the same security agency that goes overseas and guns down Palestinian children. So a lot of people say, well, why do Black folks care about Palestine so much? And when you start to investigate who the real ops are, you start to see that we got some of the same enemies. So why would we not? If you want Black people to stop caring about Palestine, then you need to demilitarize our neighborhoods and you need to free the land.
Real quick, just want to shout out somebody who hit us up there in the super chat. Abdul Haram, thank you so much for your donation. You said, I think it has to have a spiritual element to it too, this movement that puts aside dogma for the sake of fellowship. I think that's actually a great comment there, Tef, in a way. I mean, it does have a spiritual element to it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. One thing for me, not to bring religion into it, but because I'm kind of a weird person when it comes to religion, I'm a little bit of everything. But I did convert to Islam on the strength of a lot of my Palestinian homies. I personally couldn't feel good praying to the same God as the oppressor. So I had to find a way that I'm going to always try to connect myself to the oppressed, to the poor, to the have-nots. And even the way I pray got to be connected to them. So if you want me to stop caring about Palestine and stop killing the family members of the people that I pray next to every Friday.
Well, Ciara, I'm curious your thoughts. We've been saying a lot, so I don't necessarily even want to pose a huge question to you. I just want to bring you back in. On this point of what has been, for me, like I actually probably was, when I first got involved in Palestinian issues, in a way it was like the opposite of Tef, actually. One of the earliest moments I can actually remember like really getting in trouble in my family. Some teacher, somebody had given me some Zionist propaganda at school. I'm 10 years old. And I came back and I like dropped some of the Zionist propaganda at the dinner table. And that went over very, very poorly. And I didn't really know what was going on, but I was like, okay, this is serious. But my dad was hardcore for Palestine. 2002, especially in the Second Intifada, where it really came to me, it was so powerful to see what happened in Ferguson because it felt like so much of what I had been trying to tell people, being a student at Howard University, all these different things for so long, like, yo, we really got to get on this. Like, this is an important issue. To see like the streets just embrace it was such a powerful moment for me, Ciara. I don't know how, you're sitting with that, but I think, it also obviously speaks to the role of the Black liberation movement as a detonator for like so many things in America, like when it's popping off, so often you can draw a link back to Black folks popping off. But before I start ranting, Ciara, I don't know. I'm just going to hand it to you.
Thank you. As you know, I also went to an HBCU, the
Florida word? Which one?
Agricultural and Mechanical University. I was on the 3rd, 1887. And I remember it was, I want to say it was 2010. I had been involved in organizing work around, service workers and LGBTQ students and, this, that. And someone was like, hey, do you want to go meet Obama? And I was like, I don't really like him, but of course I want to see Obama talk. And so they're like, cool, there's this conference in Washington, D.C. They're going to fly us out. We're going to get a hotel. Like, everything's going to be paid for. And I was like, hell yeah. And I remember being on the flight over there, and they gave you this big, thick packet, which I'm sure no one on our delegation actually read. Like, no one knew what AIPAC was, aside from like people who wanted to go into politics, felt like, you know, it'd be good to start this relationship, but no one knew what was going on. So on this packet, I remember opening it up and reading it. It was just like going in on Iran. And I'm just like, what does Iran have to do with it? Like, the whole thing was about Iran. And I'm like, what is this? So anyway, fast forward, I get to the day of the conference. I'm going into the conference. We have this whole VIP Black delegation thing. And I remember just being looked at like with pure hatred. And I'm like, what up? Like, I'm with you, VIP. And I remember the conference opened up. I can't remember who was the head of AIPAC then. But before Obama went to speak, they basically were like, Obama is not helping the Israeli people. Obama's, needs to go to war with Iran to protect the Israeli people. This is right before Obama goes on. And then, like, I remember going out in the hall. I had to go to the bathroom, and there was someone from Al Jazeera there, and I was like, hey, what up? And they were like, but I can't remember what interaction it was, but I just remember, like, it hit me that I didn't really know what was going on, but I was in the wrong place. And I remember just leaving there, like, crying. And I remember this huge group of, like, I guess BDS people, now that I think back at it. And they start hounding me like, do you know what they do to African babies? And I'm like, here, just take my credentials. I don't want anything to do with it. And then I, like, ran off, literally. And that was, like, my introduction, I guess. And like I said, thanks to Ahmed Abu Snaid. I remember when I first met him, I thought he was Puerto Rican. I never knew anyone who was Palestinian, So, yeah, that was how I actually learned. Yeah.
Ahmed was the first Dream Defender I ever met at a pro-Palestine rally in Upper Senate Park, which is only relevant to people in D.C., where a lot of protests happen. But he was the first person I ever met from the Dream Defenders on this issue, which is big. Tef, I'm really glad you brought out Bassem, who, I think to everyone who had and did follow what was happening in Ferguson knows that name. He made it into the floor of Congress. As Cori Bush.
He actually, Bassem Masri was my into Ferguson. And I actually met Tef in Ferguson through Bassem Masri. But I was writing for the Electronic Intifada, and because I wanted to go cover what was happening in Ferguson. And he like brought me to the front lines. And may he rest in peace, rest in power. He was quite an important person, I think, in bridging these two struggles.
Talk about that. Why did you, as a writer for the Electronic Intifada, want to be in Ferguson? Because I think most people who know Electronic Intifada only know it for the Middle East.
So I actually started journalism, covering criminal justice issues, covering police issues, particularly police shootings. But I also grew up in a Lebanese family. I grew up watching Israel bomb Lebanon. I grew up really understanding the struggle for Palestine just because of my family's background. And so, that was always something I was passionate about. And I ended up moving into writing about Palestine because of the ongoing attacks on Gaza. And so, but I still had this hunger for the racist police killings in America and bringing attention to that. And Ferguson really bridged those two things, because it was amazing. Like Tef was mentioning, there was people literally online as people were getting tear gassed in Ferguson. People from the West Bank, from Palestine, were like giving advice on how to deal with it. And I'd always been really interested in the fact that almost every single law enforcement agency in America has sent their police chiefs on these propaganda trips to Israel to essentially learn from the Israeli police, which is an occupying force, and vice versa. Israeli police come to the US, they go to Atlanta quite often for these police exchanges to learn how to police. And so they're taking lessons from each other because they're essentially doing the same thing. They're occupying neighborhoods and acting as like a military force. And so I really wanted to go cover what was happening in Ferguson because it was the first time, at least I had seen, where these two struggles were being intimately linked in a very interesting and I think historic way that still has reverberations till now, as like Ciara and Tef are talking about. That was like a springboard. That Ferguson moment was a springboard for these delegations to Palestine. And these understandings of like how these two issues are so deeply connected.
Yeah, no, I think it's real. And, the reason I brought up, Cori Bush's speech, I mean, it was fantastic in many ways, but I was just, when I saw it after it had happened, and I was like, oh, damn, she's talking about Bassam. Like, she's really bringing it out here. I was just thinking about how much things have changed, because just before I was reading Kwame Ture's autobiography, and he's laying out how SNCC adopted a pro-Palestinian position. And of course, for those who study, as we know, it was the role of Ethel Minor, who had worked with Minister Malcolm X, who of course today is his birthday, who did it. But when the book dropped in 2004, she was still one of the top NAACP officials in San Antonio. So he didn't mention her name for security reasons. And that was like deep to me, because I was like, man, that was 2004. And now here in like the well of Congress, the Black liberation movement coming out of Ferguson has lifted Cori Bush into this position in Congress, talking about the issue of Palestine. I don't really know where I'm taking that, Tef, but it just was a profound moment for me to connect all those things at once.
Yeah. I fully agree with you, though. And I hope history really tells that tale of the tape about Black, marginalized, poverty-stricken, uneducated, no health care, can't go to the store, buy whatever we want, but we find a symmetry between a group of people who are equally oppressed, if not more, in a so-called third world country, in the so-called Arab world. And the things that have been done to drive our two groups of people specifically apart, and to separate the struggles, and to muddy the waters about the facts surrounding the matter, because that's what I'm finding interesting about this current moment as it relates to Palestine, is that as a person who has been persecuted, followed, my websites have been hacked, my life has been ruined for speaking out on this particular issue so many times, time and time again. I've been pushed to the brink of suicide for speaking on this. And to see now that folks are not afraid, and folks are opening their mouths, and folks are going outside, and folks are actually standing up, and folks are pushing back on the rhetoric that comes through with the lies, that because there's just a mountain of lies that come through to legitimize this apartheid state. And I am very excited about seeing folks push back on that. But I got to be clear, because for me and from so many other people, Palestine is not an issue where you can protest it away. Because we are now in a direct conflict with the state. When you choose to get down with this issue, and the comrades and the people that are getting down with this issue, you are now an outlaw. You are rebelling against a force that does not want you to speak, a force that will do anything that they can to smother you, a force that will do everything that they can to take away your funding. Every relationship in your life can feel it over this issue. And so as for the new people that are coming into the movement, those of us that have been around as it pertains to Black and Palestinian solidarity, we do have a responsibility to educate people about how and why this is different. And I have a lot of fear emerging out of this moment, because I see a lot of mass mobilizations, and I'm not against mobilizations, but I think that for the Black movement, being in solidarity is not good enough. Solidarity now has to be you extending the full might of your organizing mechanisms to help the Palestinians organize. If you're not doing that, then you're doing a disservice to the entire movement.
Mm-hmm. Ciara.
Yes, thank you, Tef. I agree. I think that we've been able to see strong parallels in the way in which the state acts. And I think that, that is why international working class solidarity is so important, because we need to know the U.S. state never oppresses equally. There always has to be some unevenness. And so for us to really understand what we're up against, we have to not only understand the way in which the U.S. state oppresses us, but the way in which the U.S. state operates in other countries as well. And you see, it was recently, the Organization of American States. I don't even think we have enough time to go into all that history. But the Organization of American States that has, backed Jovenel Moise, the dictator in Haiti right now, has drafted a referendum constitution that none of the Haitian people have even seen. They named Hamas a terrorist organization. They're always condemning Cuba, messing up stuff in Nicaragua and, all these different places. May 3rd, there was a massacre in Colombia by the police there. OAS says nothing. And so we have to always think about what are the interests of the state? Again, follow the rich white man or follow Wall Street. What are their interests in all of this? It's not, we can't just look at it on the surface. I think that's one thing, and I'll close here. I think that's one thing that I don't want to say upset, but I get nervous about in our sort of anti-war peace international movement, whatever you call here in the United States, these sort of like different fragmented sort of networks, is that we have this sort of eclecticism where in place of a political ideology, we just pick up anything that looks like this, it just looks like this, and not actually knowing that history, not actually engaging with those people and having conversation, nor building organization movement here so that we can coordinate together to end the U.S. state's I guess that's something that I feel like in closing up here, I feel like it's important to understand is the role of the state and our duty to take it on from every angle and positioning.
Yeah. No, it's a good reminder that this is a real struggle and a worldwide struggle. And I think what we're seeing in Palestine is a good reminder of how serious it is and what it really takes to make a difference and to make a change. And we can say the same thing about Ferguson, say the same thing about Baltimore, where Rania and I were just after the uprising there. What we saw last year, is so crucial, I think, for people to understand that we are really in it. Abdu Haram, another donation. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, being in here with us and everybody who's in the chat and everyone who's helping us out, spreading this around. And I'll just quickly say, if you're on YouTube, subscribe, hit that bell, because we'll continue to try to bring it. Tef, maybe the last piece of it here that I want to, well, it's not the last piece of it, obviously, but one piece I just want to get your thoughts on quickly before I know you got to run. Does it feel to you like this is another indication what we're seeing in terms of the movement in Palestine? We talked about this in the beginning with Ciara, that as the Maoists used to say, imperialism is both a real tiger and a paper tiger, and it's crises that reveal the possibilities for struggle to succeed, not just to happen. Is this a moment that you feel is indicative of that?
Anytime that the people resist is a moment. Because we don't get to tell our stories because our victors write the history books. So they're never going to accurately tell you when the people actually defeated their regime. I look at Ferguson as if we physically, for lack of better words, whooped their A. You know what I'm saying? The streets whooped their behinds. So they had to go get extra soldiers. They couldn't do nothing with Crips, Bloods, Palestinians, Black Muslims, Arab Muslims, Latinos, LGBTQ folks. They couldn't do nothing with a battalion of people made up of those identities that was not going to back down. Every time you went and got a pistol, we went and got more people. People power is the way. So I feel like we're at a special time, point blank period, in humanity. And this generation, what we're doing and what we're going to have to do is really determine how far we're willing to take it. I define love as how far you're willing to take it. So, and when you really look at it, like, you know, when your mama gives birth to you, she goes through a lot of pain and she sacrifices her body for that. And she pushes you out, and her body will never be the same after that. But she loved you enough to do that because that's how far she was willing to take it. And we got to extend ourselves to that type of pain to the people, in a sense. That's a divine pain. That's an admirable pain. And if we ain't willing to bleed and really actually go through what we got to go through, it's not just physical pain, but it's even mental, ideological, spiritual, social. This issue for me is one where it makes it clear. The lines are drawn in the sand. People want to party and kiki and act like Joe Biden and Kamala, the AIPAC army was a victory against Trump. And when we were asking some of these same folks, y'all know me, I don't bite my tongue. We was asking some of these same folks before these people weren't even on the ballot. Yo, what's their position on Palestine? What's their position on this? What's their position on that? We got no real answers from that. And now all of a sudden, the same cats, the same people who couldn't give me an answer when I asked them about Palestine during the election, now you tweeting free Palestine, 48. No, homie. I'm here to tell you, you got to go with the way you voted. You can no longer separate yourself from your warmonger votes. I'm so sick of that. I'm so sick of that. I'm so sick of people voting for warmongers and separating themselves from the warmonger when the people uprise and create a genuine, organic uprising moment. Now you want to come align yourself with the forces that are on the front line of the struggle. I don't agree with that. I'm tired of the Assata Shakur crap, where you get a person that's quoting Assata. Not the Assata Shakur, the Obama Shakur crap, where you want to quote Assata, but then you want your ideology and your internal politics and your external politics are completely neoliberalist. What are you quoting these people for? These are the enemies of the people that you affirm, my friend. The people that you affirm are the opposition of the people that I'm willing to lose an arm, leg, and possibly something else for. So I'm tired of people playing with the revolution. I'm tired of people playing with the lives of the marginalized. I'm tired of people playing with Palestinian people's lives. I'm tired of people playing with poor people's lives in the ghetto. I'm tired of it. And what's going to happen? This moment is showing folks that, guess what? The cookie always crumbles. And at a time like this, y'all looking real stupid trying to pick up the pieces because you can't stop the revolution. You cannot stop it. It don't matter how many bullets you got. It don't matter how many bombs you make. It don't matter how many ballots you want to cast and cheer. Oh, no, it's y'all time. And we about to get y'all up out of here, point blank, period.
Tef Poe, co-founder of Black Men Build, artist, organizer. Really appreciate you joining us again on the show, brother.
Love y'all, man. Stay strong.
Definitely.
See, you know what's up. Love you.
Ciara, as always, it's a pleasure here. I don't want to just randomly kick you off. So if there's anything you wanted to say in relation to anything we just said, I want to also give you that opportunity.
You're like, you ain't gotta go home. No, I wanted to share with y'all. After Tef and I and others went to Palestine, we got these tattoos, and it means in Arabic "shukran," which is thanks, thank you. And we got this tattoo as a group because that's just how we felt the entire delegation. I feel like I want to cry. But just so grateful to be able to learn from people who have been in just constantly bombarded, but to continue to struggle and not just struggle for the Palestinian liberation, but international liberation. And we learned so much, and we'll be forever grateful. And I believe that this is going to continue to be fuel for the revolutionary movement that is building in the United States. And our role as people in the United States is to identify, develop, and unite leaders with strong organization that can actually be coordinated to really kick some ass.
Well, Ciara, it's always a pleasure to have you joining us here on anything we do in Breakthrough News. And I'll also note you're one of the co-hosts of It's Not You, It's Capitalism from Breakthrough News, among many of the other fantastic
which I can attest is excellent. I love listening to it.
Shukran. Yes, Rachel and Monica are awesome. And then I love Breakthrough. Like, yeah,
No, well,
All
you're
right.
also one of our secret producers for a lot of the great guests that we see. So shout out to you for all your help. But thank you so much for giving us some time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Ciara.
Well, Rania, real quick, just before we move on, just want to note for people that if you did just join, this is the Breakthrough News live stream, our rolling coverage of ongoing aggression across Palestine. At least 227 killed in the Gaza Strip, 64 children, 1,600 people in the Gaza Strip at least have been wounded. 50 schools in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed. 75,000 people at least, or maybe 72,000, there's some discrepancy there, but over 70,000 people have been forced from their home. Many of them are just in, these UN schools, tens of thousands of people trying to get in there to not be killed. So that is continuing to be ongoing there. Shortage of water, shortage of food, shortage of electricity, which is having a massive, massive impact. The only place where COVID tests can be done, destroyed by the Israeli military forces. 4 Palestinians were shot and killed yesterday in the West Bank in relationship to protests that were taking place in relationship to a general strike there. And there are there's ongoing resistance happening there in the West Bank. There were a number of funerals and for those who were killed yesterday, but there continue to be protests. And of course, inside of Israel, inside of what some call 48 Palestine, also large protests yesterday in relationship to the general strike, one of which, by the way, in East Jerusalem was brutally repressed by the Israeli police. And also, of course, people continuing to have to deal with this issue of these pogrom-style attacks, in addition to just their general assertion of their rights that is taking place. So, really all across Palestine, a level of resistance against one of the world's most powerful military machines that I think has been the catalyst for so many people to come out around the world. There continue to be large protests. Kuwait, there were protests today, yesterday in Indonesia, a number of different places. So we're continuing to see the global resistance grow, but of course, the ongoing issue in Gaza. And as I mentioned, I want to just quote this correctly again, just to give people a sense of the intensity of what's happening there at those airstrikes. At one point last night, 122 bombs dropped on Gaza in 25 minutes. 122 bombs dropped in 25 minutes. And just finally, in terms of where the international arena stands, the Israeli government is now daring the United States, which is probably the only country that can bring them to heel, to do something. President Joe Biden attempting to improve his own position after yesterday's embarrassing, what I would say embarrassing outing for him in Michigan, where tens of thousands of people came out in Dearborn to protest him, and where Representative Rashida Tlaib from Detroit confronted him at the airport. Biden trying to, look better in the PR, called Netanyahu this morning, allegedly took a harder line. Netanyahu gets out of the call and immediately tells the press that he is not going to de-escalate, as Biden said that he told him to, that they're going to continue to fight, and that, in fact, they may even escalate what's happening and move to just a full-scale ground invasion and occupation of the Gaza Strip. So, essentially just thumbing their nose at the United States, saying, well, what are you really going to do? Even though they can do something, but the Israelis know that they won't, and that politically they won't do anything, and that Biden is only doing this for PR because of the massive outcry here in the United States. And we're seeing some of those photos from Dearborn to our left now, huge demonstration. But that is more or less where things stand, Rania. I know there's a couple things you wanted to also bring to, but I also want to just bring on screen here our colleague Kei Pritsker from Breakthrough News, who has also just been following this very, very closely. Kei, thank you for joining the live stream here.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely happy to have you here. There's a lot happening, Kei. The one thing that we've sort of mentioned just tangentially is that today is the birthday of Malcolm X and Ho Chi Minh, an important date to, I think, commemorate every year. But it feels like falling as it does at this moment feels particularly poignant, since these really are, we talk about resistance and fighting for liberation, two of the most well-known, most inspirational figures around the world. Everywhere you go, you see photos, pictures of Ho Chi Minh and Malcolm X in every country. I've seen them all over. It feels particularly poignant, Kei, to be talking about that history today.
Yeah, it really does. And I think just picking up right where you and also Tef left off, I think the lesson of Vietnam and the lesson of colonialism in the United States is that any colonized people that are facing genocide. And let's be real, the Vietnamese people, but also Black Americans are facing genocide, and we're facing genocide. These people will never just take it. They're not just going to, sit by and let their communities be destroyed. They're going to fight back. And, talking about fighting, I mean, I think, one thing in all this coverage is people have highlighted how tragic, and certainly it's very tragic what's happening in Palestine. But I think one thing that really needs to be brought forward is that the Palestinians are also fighting back. When I think about the legacy of Ho Chi Minh, I mean, the Vietnamese were colonized first and foremost by the French, then by the Japanese, then by the United States. And I mean, in the Vietnam War, 3 million Vietnamese people were killed. But even before that, I mean, the French, not only did they make it illegal to resist, not only, were you prohibited from having weapons, they also made it illegal to even say the word Vietnam. It was called French Indochina then. And, to think about how in Palestine, I mean, the sentence for having a revolver was 6 years in prison. Waving a Palestinian flag was illegal until the first Intifada. I mean, colonialism really is about, just erasing the identity of a people. So, the fact that we are celebrating Ho Chi Minh's birthday today is a great reminder that, while these colonizers are trying to kill and trying to wipe out a people, I mean, the Israelis said that their strategy, it was Ben Gurion who said his strategy was that we're going to kill the old will die, and the young will forget. The Palestinians are showing the world that they will never forget. And not only will they never forget, they're saying no matter what you do to us, you could turn off our electricity, you could turn off our internet, you can poison our water, you can kill my family, but I'm still somebody. And I will remind you that every single day, even if it means throwing a rock, even if it means boycotting your goods, even if it means firing a rocket. So, I'm fully here for the Palestinian struggle. And I think today is a great day to celebrate that and remember that.
Yeah. No, and I think the intertwining of what you just said is so huge. I mean, at the time of the Vietnam War raging, obviously that was when the Palestinian struggle for liberation emerged on the world scene. People like Layla Khaled and others. And those struggles were 100% in solidarity also with revolutionary Cuba. Malcolm X, of course, spoke out against Zionism, and towards the end of his life was firmly affiliated with all of the strongest forces that were opposed to the Israeli aggression. And so, we can even go one layer deeper of Ho Chi Minh, who was, as he himself noted, partially radicalized by his time in Harlem, where he was working at a dishwasher, going to UNIA meetings and hearing Marcus Garvey. So, I mean, the level of intertwining historically, contemporarily at that time, I mean, the direct solidarity is so palpable and so clear. And I think that you're right. I mean, you think about the legacy of someone like Malcolm X, and you think about the Palestinian resistance. I mean, Malcolm X was, of course, this was his point, is that the occupier only really understands the language they speak in. And he would always say, I'm not a violent person, but the only language that they understand is self-defense. The only language that they understand is self-defense. And I think when we see what's happening in Gaza, and really what we see from Palestinians all around the world, I mean, not everyone is a supporter of Hamas or Islamic Jihad or the PFLP or the DFLP. Some people don't like any of the factions or any of the parties, but you see that there is a huge amount of unity around resistance because people recognize it's not about the political ideology, but that they could never emerge on the world stage. I mean, Black people in America, the same piece, to only way to really be recognized. And this was obviously something pioneered by Malcolm X. In many ways, not really pioneered. It was really pioneered by people like William Patterson and communists in the 30s, but picked up by Malcolm X in a very, very powerful way, and Amiri Baraka and many others. Was that, you had to challenge U.S. imperialism on its own ground in a way that was extraordinarily uncomfortable, perhaps, for them, and perhaps controversial, but that really only by speaking in the language that they understood, could you speak. I mean, Martin Luther King, a riot is the language of the unheard. That really, it's only the resistance of people, because international law, all these other, I mean, I think Rania actually said that earlier in this week, like, what is the international community? I mean, the number of just total violations of, UN resolutions by Israel. How could they not do anything else? And I think the Vietnamese, of course, such a powerful element. I mean, just here's one other random piece. At the height of the Vietnam War, Vietnam actually sent a surgeon to Guinea to work in a field hospital for the liberation fighters from Guinea-Bissau when they were being brutally bombed and destroyed and needed every doctor they could get. And I just think that when we look at those histories, there's so much there. There's so much richness there. And I think it's just, the birthdays happen every year. I think this is also Yuri Koshiyama's birthday, if I'm not mistaken, another great Japanese-American revolutionary who, really part of the Black liberation movement, there's no other way to describe it, played such a huge role. But it really is just notable, I think, for that spirit of resistance. And I think, it speaks, Rania, to some degree, to the point that, you've made and that other people you said have commented to you about how here we are in this moment, despite everything that's happened, to see the resistance growing and getting stronger against all odds. And I feel like that's one of the things I take from the legacy of people like Malcolm X or Ho Chi Minh, is that the odds seemed extremely long in all of their struggles as well. But, in the Black liberation movement, we're still fighting. But, ultimately a level of success that can happen. And it feels like the Palestinians, well, I don't know. You know where I'm going with this. Let me not just editorialize.
Well, no. I mean, I think all of this is so important to note. And I think what the root here that we're all talking about is really imperialism. It's Western imperialism. That's what draws all of this together. That's what connects all of this. And I think it's really important. I'm so happy that so many people are waking up to the issue of Palestine, wanting to get educated in the issue of Palestine and understanding the root causes. And I really want people who are new to this issue to understand it as an issue that's connected to American imperialism. Because I think there is this kind of like liberal attempt to, because this is just what liberals do, to make this issue about just Israel-Palestine. Like it's kind of this isolated case of like, Israel's just a really big bully state and we support them because of the Israel lobby. And as a result, Palestinians are being oppressed. But it's so much more than that. Right? Like we showed that clip yesterday of Joe Biden, or a couple days ago of Joe Biden back in the 80s saying, if there wasn't an Israel, we would have to invent an Israel because of how useful Israel is to American interests, right? It's the best, he said, it's the best $3 billion investment we make every year. And that is because beyond, all the awful things Israel does to Palestinians, that's not why the U.S. is supporting Israel. It's not supporting Israel because Israel oppresses Palestinians. It's supporting Israel because Israel is an arm of American imperialism in the Middle East. And like there has been this attempt in recent days, I'm sure you guys have seen it, I'm not going to go too specific into it, but an attempt to try and actually attack the anti-imperialist elements of the Palestine solidarity movement by saying, because there are people who opposed the U.S. dirty war on Syria, which is right next door to Israel-Palestine. For, years and years, the U.S. we all know now, was covertly supporting and funding and arming this jihadist insurgency to try to collapse the Syrian state and overthrow the Syrian government and essentially turn it into what they turned Libya into, which is this country that is now just, has a power vacuum and is run by competing militias. And the U.S. didn't succeed in doing that, but there were those of us who are anti-imperialists inside the Palestine solidarity movement that openly and vocally opposed that dirty war on Syria. We opposed collapsing the Syrian state the way that the U.S. collapsed the Iraqi state, destroying yet another country in the Middle East. And in recent days, there has been this active attempt to try to once again attack anti-imperialist voices inside the Palestine solidarity community by coming in and being like, oh, all of these people supporting Palestine also support Assad. You can't listen to them. They're a bunch of Assad as dictator lovers. And so like to that, people who have that mentality and then people who are also maybe getting confused by this argument, because it is a pro-Israel argument to try to divide. I just want to note that like opposing the dirty war on Syria, opposing the U.S. attempted overthrow of the Syrian government, it wasn't about supporting Assad. Nobody supports Assad. Obviously, he's like corrupt and authoritarian and abusive and brutal. Whatever. Crimes were committed. He committed crimes to defend the Syrian state. And obviously, the Syrian state became monstrous due to the war, because that's what happens when there's a war. But opposing that dirty war on Syria wasn't about Assad. It was about preventing the collapse of Syria as a state. And it was about it was about opposing Western imperialist use of opposition, extremist militias to establish a state loyal to the West and loyal to the Saudis. And if you support Palestine and you support Palestinians, then you have to oppose the destruction of Syria. And you have to oppose the attempt to turn it into another pliable vassal state like Jordan. And that's unless you think that the West or the Saudis or Jordan or the country of Jordan cares about Palestine, which they don't. And meanwhile, I want to remind people, and this is part of the reason Syria was attacked the way it was. Who facilitated the Palestinian ability to defend themselves? It was Iran and Syria and Hezbollah, the actors who stand against the West, who stand against Western imperialism. Whatever you think about them, that's just a fact that I just stated. You don't have to like them, that's a fact. Who helped the Palestinian resistance groups with technology? The Syrians gave them weapons. The Syrians gave weapons to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah gave weapons to Hamas and gave them the technology. That is a fact. That's reality. So I just want people to sit and reflect on that, because part of the reason that Syria was attacked the way it was in the last decade had very much to do with its assistance to Palestinian resistance. And every other day, the Israelis bomb Syria. They bomb Syria using Lebanese airspace. Every other day that happens. I live in Lebanon. I see it happen. I hear the Israeli fighter jets on their way to bomb Syria from Lebanese airspace. So I just want people to understand that, because there is currently an attempt to use the issue of Syria to once again divide Palestine solidarity. I don't think it's working, but I think it's an active measure to try to suffocate the anti-imperialist narrative from the issue of Palestine as the issue of Palestinian liberation becomes more popular. So that's my take. I just wanted to give that little rant because I see these conversations happening and I really wanted to address them.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important issue. And I mean, there's a lot to be said there. There's particularly Syria's role in the so-called Arab peace plan in 2002 and the Bush administration attempt to eliminate the Palestinian question for all time. Very important issue for sure. Real quick, I think we have a few people that are just sort of stacked up here who have made some donations. Just want to quickly shout you out. Dale Sendero, thank you for your donation, saying this is excellent coverage on this tragic event. Keep fighting hard, brothers and sisters in Palestine, in solidarity with you 100% against the forces arrayed against you. Really, shout out to you. Thank you so much. Dende, thank you so much. Also, there was a keep it up emoji. We will do the best we can. Huey Long, from the grave, perhaps, giving us a little donation there. That's another interesting historical issue. Was Huey Long right-wing or was he a populist? I don't want to get into that here, Kei, but it is an important historical issue about the 30s. But nevertheless, shout out to Huey Long, shout out to Dende, shout out to El Sendero. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate everybody else in the super chat. Kei, you look like you really want to get in on the 1935 Share the Wealth movement.
No. you could tell me about that after this show, maybe. But no, I actually want to jump back in on the tie-in of Malcolm X, because for those who don't know, the autobiography of Malcolm X was like one of the most influential books of my life, and I really feel like I wouldn't be here today had I not read that book. But one line that really just stuck with me in my head is like Malcolm keeps saying over and over and over, "I'm going to die a violent death. I know it." Like he knows it in his bones. He knows it's coming. And one part of that obviously is he's a black man in America. I mean, you're facing the odds, but the other thing is, Malcolm chose to resist. He could have easily just said, I know the situation here is messed up. Like, I know this is all bad, but I'm just going to go about my day. I'm going to, pay my rent, I'm going to, live my life and die. But he didn't do that. He spoke truth to power like no one else in history. And that ultimately is what got him killed. And, it's the same thing with the Palestinians. I mean, the Palestinians they could give up. They could say, okay, you know what? This is too much, but they never say that. I mean, the PFLP came out recently and said, this is a referendum on the resistance. And you see the widespread support for resistance, no matter what form it takes. I mean, I think being realistic about what we're up against is really what's important. I want to bring Ho Chi Minh back into this. For those who don't know, the sort of the introduction to the Constitution for the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, it's the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. It's that part that said all human beings are, have the inalienable rights and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Black Panther Party, which is also, the intellectual sort of heir of Malcolm X's work, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale were inspired by Malcolm X's work. the 10th point of the Black Panther Party program was, we believe that all human beings have the right. I can't remember the lines, but the point is, they were using these words against the imperialists, and they were saying, hey, you remember these things you wrote in 1776? You remember this promise you made to Black America? You remember this promise you made to the people of the world? Well, you're not keeping it. And you know what? The ultimate conclusion of both of these groups, the Vietnamese resistance, the Black resistance, is, you know what? We have to remind you, like you said, Eugene, we have to remind you that we're here. We have to remind you that we're people. And, the only language you speak sometimes is self-defense. And you know what? We are going to defend ourselves. We are going to defend our communities. And I see that same spirit coming out of the Palestinians.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are going to move to a close here on this live stream. And just before we go, just to remind people of the state of affairs, the ongoing assault, especially in the Gaza Strip, is continuing. The Israeli government making it very clear that they're going to continue their bombing and naval and ground artillery campaign. Not clear how long, but that it will continue to intensify. 227 people have died, Palestinians, inside of the Gaza Strip. At least 1,600 have been injured. 64 children, I believe, have been killed at least. And of course, all these numbers will go up. And again, just to give you the disproportionality, 227 Palestinians dead in the Gaza Strip, only 12 people killed inside of Israel. 4 Palestinians were shot yesterday in the West Bank. In relationship to mass protests growing out of a general strike, upwards of 70 people were injured in that same vein. There have been a number of journalists, by the way, who have also been assaulted in different ways by Israeli police in the West Bank. Actually, believe it or not, the Sky News reporter in the West Bank has actually been bringing a lot of this to light. So that has also been a factor here. And then inside of Israel itself, quote unquote, as some would say, inside of 48 Palestine, ongoing pieces, large marches tied to the general strike. Also, the general strike was big there yesterday. Also ongoing attempts by people to defend themselves against these pogromist-style attacks. But obviously, Gaza is bearing the brunt of this brutal air assault. 227 dead, 64 children in an ongoing assault. No real end in sight per se. I mean, Egypt and Qatar in particular, along with the United States and France, are saying they're doing all these negotiations, but it doesn't seem like much will come of that, at least in the next 24 hours. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the bell to get alerts. We will continue to bring you rolling coverage as this continues to unfold, this terrible, tragic, brutal assault that's happening all across Palestine. But we thank you once again for watching us here on Breakthrough News, to everyone who watched, everyone who shared, everyone who donated it. Rania, as always, despite the tragedy of the situation, always happy to appear here alongside you. And again, we will continue to cover this issue here on Breakthrough.